Hello and welcome to Tales from a Professional Nerd. My name is Bryan Steele, and I will be your nerd today and every other day that you watch one of my silly little shows. Hi, welcome to my show. So I like to start every show off real quick with a week in Bryan. Basically, just kind of goes over the last week and kind of cool stuff that happened, any gaming that I might have done, that sort of thing. And then we kind of get into the topic. Today's going to be a fast session. Session? Again, my brain is kind of mush at the moment because I am in the middle of sort of an unbelievably decent sized crunch of a deadline. The Power Rangers book that I'm working on is fantastic and it is coming together really, really well. But I need to get it done kind of on the kind of quickly so we can get it into playtesting and that kind of stuff. So aside from that, working on Warzone lore. I've got some painting commissions going on. I actually signed a pretty cool painting gig for a company to do some of their demo figs. Still waiting on the figures to get here, but when they get here, it'll be rad, I'm sure. And that's about it. I've been doing a little bit of planning in my planning book. Ooh, of course I turned to an empty page. Ooh, planning book. For the D&D game that I run. Hi, buddy. For the D&D game that I run. This is Bruce, by the way, if you can barely see him. He's my 115-pound Malamute. I love you. Bruce is in Bruce Wayne. Behind us is John. John Johns, as in the Martian Manhunter. Somewhere in the house is... Alright, but I need to be able to do stuff. Okay, fine. And somewhere else in the house is the third dog, our German Shepherd Barry, is in Barry Allen the Flash, because he's training to be a rescue or a service dog for Natalie's seizures. And then we have Arrow, as in Green Arrow, one of our cats. We've got Larfleeze, as in the Orange Lantern, one of our cats. And Lady Shiva, the bearded dragon, upstairs. And then today, we actually added a new life form to the house. It was serendipitous that we came across basically a rescue that needed life, needed a place to stay. And so that is Nuranal, the Dreamer, if you are into DC Comics. She's a beautiful little white kitten who has two different color eyes. And Natalie named her Nora Now off of the Dreamer, and I love it. I love it. Love. All right, so enough about the pet stuff. But you'll note the door to the studio is open. Boop. Because Natalie is actually out playing a D&D game across town, which means I got the house to myself. Which means I need to have an ear open for in case there is pet madness, like the one that just visited us a second ago. So there may be some furry creatures that come in and visit while I'm filming, but like I said, I've got way too much to do to have this be a long episode, but I did want to check in with you guys. I didn't want to skip a week because February is a short month anyway, and I got to give you guys an opportunity to get in on the amazing Power Rangers themed February comment raffle. Speaking of which, the January comment raffle winner, Calamari from episode 126, has not yet, or hopefully by the time this airs they have not yet reached out to me to give me their address so I can give them their prize, which is a cool prize. It's a very cool prize. Alright, so I already talked about the work stuff. Weight-wise, I'm at 55 pounds lost, still trying to get to that next milestone. Part of it's hard, haven't gotten around doing a lot of exercise or anything. I've just been a lot of sitting in my chair and stuff in my face, full of, thankfully, low-carb stuff, but it's still stuff in my face. I'll get back to it when the weather gets a little better, and when I'm not quite so, laser focused on getting stuff done here in the studio. Um, Aside from that, games I play a lot of Sea of Thieves. I actually have recently gotten back into the Warhammer Space Wolf Xbox Live game. Um, it's goofy. It's like a combination miniatures card game sort of thing. The controls on it are a little little hinky. I'm not a huge fan of some of the ways the controls work, but I'm having a good time. It is occupying my brain when I want just a quick little 20 minutes worth of. I just need something to kind of reset my brain. Media wise, Rick and Morty season 5 is out on streaming services. I blasted through that in 2 days. Rick and Morty never fails to, they might have some episodes that aren't, that aren't like just bangers, but this episode is full of them. It is so good. If you're a Rick and Morty fan, find a way to catch these episodes. If you are not a Rick and Morty fan, I don't know why. It's amazing writing. It's super deep and funny as all get out. And if you haven't watched any Rick and Morty, now is the great time to try. Find one of these streaming services. Start at season 1. Binge your way through. Book of Boba Fett ended. The series finale, or the season finale, was this week. Super cool. Again, the Boba Fett was a lot of fan service as a season, but I'm a fan, so it was servicing me. It was sending stuff out to me. There were a couple of episodes that a lot of people thought were really strong that I was like, I think this could have waited. But I'm not going to spoil things. If you are a Star Wars fan and you dig Boba Fett and you dig Mandalorian stuff, you should check it out. It ended really cool. Very, obviously, climactic, stuff happens, but, yeah, so there's that. Games I played, so since we last spoke, I really only had a chance to play in my Waking Realms game, which is the homebrew D&D game run by my friend Micah, who is I'm playing the Dancing Cat Monk, and this last session I came within one die roll of not playing the Dancing Cat Monk. I bit off more than I could chew. As a monk that doesn't have that whole distance way of the fist thing, fighting somebody who bleeds acid at you, or fire or whatever it was. Basically, every time I hit this guy, or somebody would hit him and I was next to him, I was taking some fire damage, and there was no good way for me to get around it. So I was doing 10, 11 per hit and taking 4 or 5. Do 10, 11, taking 4 or 5. And I ended up getting knocked down into death saves when the mind flayer threw a fireball in the room. Didn't care about his own creature, his minion that we were beating up. It was cool. It was a typical villain moment. But it was way enough damage to send me into death saves. And then before I had a chance to even roll my first death save, I got hit. So I already had, going into my following turn, I was already one check towards dead. If my die would have come up a 1, I would have been, a corpse. And I don't know at this point in the campaign. I know we've got a lot of money and we've got resources and stuff. So my party probably could have found a way to raise me if that was the case. But I don't know. Maybe I may have had to change characters midstream or something along those lines. We'll see. We won't see. I ended up being healed, and I had, making my one die roll that I needed, and then someone got to me to help me up. So that was the week in Bryan. Again, a lot of work, a little bit of playtime, but a lot of work. Looking forward to getting this project done, not just for the payday, but also because it's one step closer to people getting to see the work that I'm working on. And I need to devote, honestly, after I get this book wrapped, I need to devote maybe a week just a week solid of nothing but Warzone writing. Um, I've been doing like just kind of a little bit here and there, a little bit here and there, getting ready for the Kickstarter, and I think that I need to just really sink my teeth into it and just slam it out and get Alex all the words that he needs to start piecing together the book, because obviously you want to have a finished, if not near finished, copy of everything going into the Kickstarter. And is the lore necessary to have done before then? Could he have like a mock book or something? Sure, but he shouldn't have to. And I'm not that kind of worker. I'm gonna make it happen. Am I like a full partner in this? Absolutely not. I'm still just a contracted employee. But when it comes to wanting to make the best product that we can for this, for this endeavor, yeah, we want to make one hell of a good version of Warzone. Warzone Eternal. I hope so. Okay, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So back when I was running Dark Age for Come On, Cool Mini or Not, CMON, whatever you want to say, um, I, I was so proud. I still am. I'm still proud of that game. We took it from Dave Taylor and myself, primarily. We took that a failing game, a game that was dying on the vine, and we turned it into some fine wine. And that's that. And I'm not trying to brag or pat myself on the back or anything. I'm just very proud of how that went down. There are still people playing the game. There's going to be an unofficial tournament and play area at Adepticon this year. I believe there was a tournament at Captain Con last week. I mean, like, it for being a dead game that has been not supported for years at this point. It's still going strong, and I still occasionally get tagged in posts and things where people are like, I want to know where the story was going, or you teased this creature, what do we know about it? I am hoping that that Resnova and myself and everybody involved in this project can bring Warzone Eternal into that same sort of like hook niche market that where gamers are like, yeah, I play this game, but I'll always play this. I want people to go, I'll always, because right now there's people that will tell me that they will never stop playing Dark Age. That they're looking for like 3D print files to field models that I made cards for, but models never got made. There's people that are designing. There's one guy, I can't remember his name, who designed the entire brood spawn faction, like literally just from the art, and it's so good. He did such a great job. Like that's the kind of devotion and the kind of like, I don't say loyalty, that's not right. The kind of devotion and the kind of enjoyment and influence, maybe. I don't know. The word is escaping me. But basically, I want players that want to dive in on Warzone Eternal, and when they start playing it, they grab their friends and get them playing it, and we start seeing tournaments, and we start, whether or not Res Nova is flying the flag of making sure that this stuff happens, that where the fans are like, we want this to happen. OP kits, Res Nova might not have plans to make them, but man, as players, we're going to find a way to put that together. Or we're going to ask them, hey, please make this for us. Whatever the case may be, I'm very confident that because of the rich lore, the amazing models that are going to be made, I've seen some of the renders. They're going to be pretty freaking cool, especially once they get some good paint jobs on them. And then hopefully the rules in the game itself. I like to think that, but I also don't want to sound completely full of myself. But I think we've got a really good, between the playtesters, between Alex, between myself, the original design. it's going to be a tight game, and here I think I want to say probably in just a couple months when the Kickstarter happens. You know, I'm gonna be pimping the hell out of it here, but also I'm hoping that you'll spread the words. Tell other gamers, tell other role players or miniature gamers. Hell, tell other role players. Maybe they can use the models for their games. Whatever the case may be, I'm very excited, and as soon as I'm done with this big Power Rangers book, I'm gonna dive in and get everything that Alex needs out of me completely done. Because I've designed like 2 years worth of releases for that game as far as like miniature wise, the model rules. Because designing models and taking someone's lore and putting it into rules format, like a fun and interesting rules format. For me, I love that. That's my bread and butter, and I did a lot of that early in the Warzone process, and there is a lot of stuff that has yet to even be put in front of playtesters because I did a lot of stuff, way more than Alex asked of me, and probably way more than Alex wanted. But I wanted to make sure that when I positivity being what it is, when this game takes off and Alex starts raking in the Warzone bucks, that he will have enough stuff that he won't have to look at me and go, oh my god, we need to design 10 new boxes. I wanted him to be set up, ready to go for as much as he can put together, and honestly, so part of me can be kind of sit back and be a gamer for a bit. I want to play this game as much as I want to get paid making it, which says a lot, by the way. Yeah, all right. So I totally just went off a tangent, and now let's get into the topic because I want to make sure that I get this done so I can get back to work. So I was talking, this episode. If you looked at the thumbnail, I had this here jar of water, and I was dangling the D20 in front of it. Again, totally metaphor. Splash, perfectly got in my eye. The metaphor there, of course, is that when because I got water all over the back of my hand, that changing rules as written, raw. Everybody says that raw or RAI, rules as intended. Rules as written. These are as the designers wrote them down. These are as what the designers planned on the game. These are the rules that have been put out to the public and the rules that the people that should be using. Obviously, if there are problems with those rules, there is errata and fact lists that come out, changes to files, things like that change the raw. That is normal. That happens in every game. If your game doesn't have an errata and has, it probably means that the errors just haven't been highlighted enough, or they're so minor the company making it didn't feel it was necessary. But that's normally just for mistakes, things that weren't caught, things that need to be adjusted because oops, we didn't notice that, or oops, an old version of a file got transposed onto a new one, or there's all sorts of stuff that can happen that can make the raw incorrect in some fashion or difficult to use in some fashion, more difficult than intended. There's all kinds of, which is where RAI comes into effect, rules as intended, where the designer goes, no, that's not how that's, you're reading it this way, but it's supposed to be this way. And sometimes it reads this way, but I meant for it to be this way. That's what errata is for, is to fix that. But a lot of times, especially in role-playing games, at your table, your game master, your storyteller, your DM is boss. They're the ones that choose to make the changes if they want. Whether or not they see an errata, whether or not they make their own errata, or whether or not they use what kind of collectively is called house rules. The house rules meaning, just like as you would think, if you're playing in your house or at your table or whatever, that you've got some either altered rules or new rules, or you a rule of omittance where you're basically saying no, don't follow this because we don't use that rule. All of these things they change the raw. They change the rules as written to better serve your table, to better serve your game. And there is nothing wrong with that aside from two things. Thing number one is that if you teach somebody to play the game using a bunch of your house rules, there's a very good chance that they may think, unless they were told very specifically, this is not how the rules are normally go, this is the way we do it, they're going to take that mentality with them wherever they go. And let's say they go to a convention and go to play a game and sit down and try to do something, and everybody at the table is looking at them like, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm using my inspiration to re-roll this die, to borrow a very common house rule. And everyone on the table's like, no, you got to spend your inspiration first for advantage. Boo. That player not only feels stupid and probably a little embarrassed for making that claim, but now they question their home DM. They question themselves as a player, and to a certain degree, they might not be trusted to know all of the rules in the future. Even if they know the rest of the rules back to front, someone might not go to them as a, hey, I was looking at the rules and I thought this might be the case. They might go, yeah, but you know what? That guy, he that was the guy at the table that did advantage weird, or did inspiration weird, or whatever. So you have to make sure that you are telling your players if there are any changes. Also, that same notation goes into effect that if you've got veteran players at your table, and you don't tell them about your house rules, you could absolutely just ambush them with something that happens in your game and cause some pretty significant issues if they think that you're following the rules as written, or the rules as errata, or whatever, and then suddenly you pull something out of left field and go, oh, that's the way we do it here, and you didn't tell them. That's super bad form. Maybe tell them ahead of time, or maybe write all of your house rules down in a file and give this file to your players. I know that there was a game I played in a long time ago, a Star Wars game, that had alternate uses for force points, because force points in that game were just extra dice that you had to throw on stuff, and if you weren't force sensitive, they kind of sucked. They weren't really useful. And so the game master of that game decided to make a couple of other ways to spend force points that were more narrative and more of the force working in mysterious ways, but it went ahead and let everybody have these other options. And in order to make sure that all players were reminded of it, knew it was different, and knew that it was his, he typed them out and printed them out on a page, and then basically taped that page to the front of his DM screen. So right there in front, staring at all the players, is house force point rules, and here's the list of stuff you can do. It was perfect. We had even if I forgot one of those, can I use a force point for this? I could just look. And his list included the rules as written stuff, and then a bunch of extra stuff that he added. It was a great idea, but it was very clear, it was concise, and it let everybody know this is not the normal way. This is the way I do it. So if I would play that game someplace else, there'd be no question. I might tell everyone at my table, oh, at my home game we can do this, but I wouldn't expect for it to happen. I wouldn't go, oh, this is how this is. And then the other way that altering rules is written, the actual reason for the die in the water, is it's that whole anecdote about ripples in a pond. That you throw a tiny pebble and the ripples, go out. And that little itty bitty tiny pebble changes the entire surface of everything, and when they ricochet and run into each other and stuff, that is what happens when you change the rules of a game. And I know personally, I'm not a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of adding stuff. I like doing like maybe things that I see as a weakness. I might add stuff as a game designer. But even then, I know that what I'm doing is changing the entire landscape of the game, or the entire surface of the pond is now covered with ripples. Because let's say that you change something, the designers of those games, take some things into consideration. Obviously, game balance should be one of them. Is hopefully one class is as good as another class, is as good as another class. One creature, if its threat level is 8, is as good as the next creature that is threat level 8, maybe with some slight alterations based off of environment, but like you should know roughly what you're going up against. If you've got a magic item that is rare, it should be roughly as powerful or as useful as the other rare magic items. In miniature games, this gets even more important because then you're dealing with, a versus mentality. I want to make sure that all my models, that my models are roughly as good for the points values and things like that as my opponents, because you don't want someone to just steamroll you. You don't want that to be like, oh, well, that you may have heard before when someone talking about miniature games where they go, well, that model's broken. That normally means that the designers might have missed something, or they made it too powerful, or maybe it's counterbalanced by something within the rest of the army, but it's very easy to focus on this thing. Whatever the case may be, it means that that piece does not feel as fair and fun to play against. It seems like it's stacking the deck. No pun intended. The same thing goes for role-playing, is that if you change something fundamental about the game that was designed to play that way, you have to remember what all that might affect. Recently on one of the TikToks, I saw someone advocating for the complete elimination of verbal, somatic, and material components for spells. Basically, just let everybody cast their spells willy-nilly. And not only, and they claimed it speeds things up. You don't have wizard characters that are running off, trying to find all their components. It makes things, possible, like a mute spellcaster where he signs his spells. Some cool ideas, but what you're doing when you do that is that you are now making those spellcasters better in all circumstances than they were before. And the spells are designed for a certain level of balance in consideration to how many times a day you can cast it. Does it require a 10,000 gold piece gem? Is there, can you do it while underwater because you can't, it's got verbal components, there's all these things that if you remove those limitation factors, not only are you making the spells themselves better, but you're making that class, that spellcasting class, better than it was before. And a lot of you might be going, so what if it's better? That's the whole point. We're trying to, add more fun to it. Now you look at your fighter character, the other guy in the party, who goes, wait, so now the spellcaster's just going to get to do everything all the time. He's gonna be in the spotlight forever. Now, as a game master, you can obviously move the spotlight around. You can find a way to balance that out, as far as maybe he take some spell slots away or whatever. But all that is more ripples in the pond. As you start to fix things to try and rebalance what you've done to the raw, you are creating more ripples. The more you splash around in the water that is the puddle that is this game's design, the more it gets muddy, the more it ripples, the more you cliche. Basically, you are changing things to take into consideration the things that you've changed, to take into consideration what you didn't like, but may have been already balanced. And that's where it really comes into play, is you've got to realize the very butterfly effect, that changing something intrinsic to the game's system. You know, I give all my kobolds an extra hit die. Awesome, you're making the challenge slightly better. I don't use critical success or critical fumbles on death saves. They're just raw numbers. Okay, it's a little less, a little more direct, but it's still just die rolls. All you're doing is, keeping one bad die roll from killing somebody. They got to have all three. Like that sort of thing. Using optional rules, things like flanking a bad guy gives you advantage. That is an optional rule that is found in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Like, they actually says this is a good optional rule. It's one of the ones that Matt Mercer uses in Critical Role. There's a lot of things that you might see on streams or you might read in books as optional, especially if it's published. If it's a published optional rule, it normally means that it's something that they've thought it over, and as long as you know you're doing it, it's a universal. The whole flanking an enemy gives you advantage. It would be different if they said only fighters flanking an enemy gain advantage, because then it's only helping a certain number of characters. If you make a blanket statement like this, where everybody who's flanking, then that's a different story. That ripple is, yeah, it's being sent out, but everybody can surf on it. Everybody can benefit from it. You're not being specific to one class. You're not tipping the scales. Everybody, and speaking of tipping the scales, you're also not tipping the scales against the enemy. You're not tipping the scales against the threats and the challenges that they're going up against, because you as a game master, if you know that your players can do the whole flanking gets advantage, start having your goblins do it. Start having your hobgoblins do it. Because if they're benefiting from it, you can too. It's a universal. Unless, of course, the situation is that there just isn't two people, there's just no way to fit or whatever. But you understand what I mean, is that that's not causing a ripple that is going to bounce back and possibly need to get, it makes rogues a little cooler with their backstat or their sneak attack, but there were already ways to do sneak attack shenanigans within the realm of the game. Giving something to everybody, that's not, I mean, yeah, they get to trigger it a little more, but it also means that they are always they're not, you're not going to see that rogue that goes, I'm going to stay at range nearly as often, because they want to get up there, they want to flank somebody, they want to get the advantage, they want to get their sneak attack. Like, that's just how it is. But yeah, so that's so there's difference between optional rules, that especially ones that are for everybody, than that is for making a change to the rules and splashing around in that pond willy-nilly, where you're not realizing what's going to happen. Now, my next little thing, my next little segment about this whole, please be careful when you start modifying rules in a game, because you don't know what you're doing. Not don't know you're doing like you're inept. Don't know what you're doing is you might not be able to see the butterfly effect that's being created until it already is done and in there. Is new classes. So things like the monster hunter or the blood hunter from D&D Unearthed Arcana, the artificer, artificer, whatever you want to call him. He was on Unearthed Arcana for a while. I know that there's some beta testing things going on for a few different classes to add. One of the things that I do believe is that when, as a designer, you are building these new classes, building these new feats or perks or disciplines or whatever your game has, when you're adding new ones, you have to try and do your best not to want to make it shine, because there have been way too many homebrew classes, homebrew subclasses, or whatever, where I read them and go, this guy, whoever built this is crazy. They're way overpowered. They're way too good. They get way too many toys or whatever, because that designer wants, deep down, he wants the admiration and acceptance for his rule to the table, to other gamers. And it's real easy as a designer to try and pull on those heartstrings of the players by going, it's just a little cooler than it should be, in order to make it more of an attractive choice. So now this player wants to see it in real life. They want to see it happen. Suddenly you've got a happy... sorry. You suddenly have a happy playtester who's like, oh, this is the greatest. I can't wait to use this in my game, because it's a little cooler. It's causing a little more ripple. It is one of the things that I actually fully disagree with about some of the unearthed arcana. The Blood Hunter being one of them. Is, I think that class it's too good at several things, and depending on which pathway you take for them, it fulfills way too many roles. Its weakness is that it can do too much. I've heard people say that, is that you have to spread your love out, and it's like, that's not so true. You can focus on being really good at something, and even if you're able to be just proficient at that other stuff, you're still better than the guy who can only do the other stuff. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to raw. I, as a designer, it also makes me crazy when someone's like, they look at the math, they go, oh, my least favorite term, we did the math. Did you play the game? Did you have a couple of sessions with this character, multiple encounters, run by a game master, not a calculator? No? Well, then you don't know what this is like. The game is not necessarily a mathematics simulator. Sometimes dice don't behave. Sometimes your game master might give you a bonus. Sometimes you might be a large creature stuck in a small tube. The context and environment have so much to do with role-playing games that just looking at a rule set and saying, well, this is better. Doing this is, we should do it this way because it's this way. That's super rude to the designer. And I know as a designer, I'm probably biased. I am biased, there's no question. But when someone takes my rules, or rules that I helped with, and that we test it, and that we know it does what it's supposed to do, it plays the way it's supposed to play, and goes, well, if you play it this way, it does all the wrong things, or it is terrible if you try to do it this other way. Not only is that a lot of that internet hyperbole coming up to rise like the ashes out of whichever critic got burnt down last, but it also basically is saying, I know better than the game designers. I know better than the people that made the game that I paid money for. I'm better than they are. That's rough. Now, I say that, but as a designer, one of the first things that I always do when I look into a game, almost as a knee-jerk, almost as an instinct, I can't help it, but I look at stuff and go, oh, this game would be so much better if we did this. Or, ooh, this extra rule could be amazing. And I'm guilty of it too. I'm guilty of looking at Raw and going, that's not as good as what I would do, it's not as good as what I would make, so let's change it. And unless everybody at the table is on board with that, and you've taken all the precautions into play, and you've let everybody know this is not the real game, this is not the way it's supposed to go, you get everybody prepared that they, might take their rules, this rule, to somebody else's table, and then get laughed off the table because it's not the way it's supposed to be. Whatever it's supposed to be, that is something that I have to remember to work on. Because it's hard to jump into a game, especially as a game designer, and not go, oh, man, this is what I would do. Can we try it this way? And part of it is science experiment. Part of it is I want to be able to have a better time. And I'm sure some of it is ego. Some of it is that little tiny voice that goes, you should have been on this project, bud. You'd have made a better thing. Whatever the case may be. And I'm sure you, as gamers, sometimes have that same thing happen. It is what it is. But just know that when you start meddling with the rules as they're written, there will be ripples. There will be ripples in the pond. There will be things that change that suddenly are not as good or too good, or maybe even just moderately better or worse. But whatever the case is, it is something you need to be aware of, and you can't just add house rules and change rules and get rid of rules and things and not expect your game to be fundamentally changed. It's as easy as that. But then again, if you're making all these choices and whatnot, you're trying to fundamentally change the game in order to have more fun. Which, again, that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is for everybody at the table to be having a good time. That's why we do this. That's why we make these games. So, if by splashing around in the pond, you can throw a bowling ball in there and have as many ripples as you want, as long as everybody's having a good time, you're doing fine. So, that's my take on that. That's my piece. All right, guys, I got to get back to work. You got to get back to whatever you're doing. You know what you got to do. You got to like, share, comment, subscribe. Definitely share. Let's grow this audience, and get a comment in there to try and get into the very cool February Comer Raffle. If you don't know what my prize is for that, you need to watch the last episode where I, for the first time in Comment Raffle history, I told everybody what I'm going to do with the February raffle winner for Power Rangers month. So pay attention to it. Be safe. Get your booster if you can. Wear a mask if you need to. And go out there, have a good time. Put a smile on someone else's face, even if you can't see it behind their mask. And play some games. See you next week.